السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. نحمده ونصلي على رسول النبي الكريم. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. آمين. قال الله تعالى في شان حبيبي: إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله صل على سيدنا مولانا محمد وبارك وسلم عليه صلاة وسلاما عليك يا سيدي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. Today is the 16th of Dhul Qa'dah. So by this time next month, those who have gone for the Hajj will be wrapping up the rites or the ritual rites of the Hajj. And last week we spoke about Hudaybiyah, which is related to the Umrah but also to the Hajj. And we just kind of glossed over at various aspects of that journey of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we'll come back to certain points as we keep going forward, and today we'll start talking about the Hajj itself, inshallah. If we look at the Hajj, it is, kind of the final of the 5 pillars. It is kind of the pinnacle of devotion and love. If you look at the 5 pillars that everybody talks about, these aren't 5 equal pillars. These are foundational pillars that one is built on top of the other. And the foremost foundation, of course, is Iman. La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And everything else is then built upon that. And so, for Iman, there are no exceptions. Unless somebody is just totally insane or unable to comprehend anything, they have to have Iman. Salat, if somebody is in their senses, again, there's no exception. Fasting, there are exceptions. If somebody is sick, somebody is on a journey, these become exceptions for the fasting. Zakat, there are exceptions. If you don't meet a certain requirement as far as wealth, then you're exempted from zakat. Hajj has more exceptions. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions in the Quran that those who have istata'a, those who have the means. He doesn't say the wealth. So it's not simply that I have enough money to go from here to Makkah and back. But I also have to have the conditions where my responsibilities that I'm leaving behind will be taken care of. So there are other restrictions on that, and so that becomes not an obligation on everybody. But if you look at it, again, it is the pinnacle of love. But when you look in the Quran, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Hajj in Surah Baqarah, He talks about it in Surah Al-Imran, Surah Hajj, there's a whole surah named after the Hajj. If you read those verses, He's constantly emphasizing His signs. And when we look at, the universe, as we know, everything is the sign of Allah. Because everything that we see should remind us that there is one who created it, who is Allah. So, Sha'ir or ayat, signs, These are things that remind us of our Lord from an Islamic perspective. And of course, you walk outside, you got the sign stop, or, detour or whatever. So these are signs to guide you. These are also, Islamically, the signs we talk about are the signs to guide us to our Lord. And as we know, the greatest sign of all is Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself. And so when we look at the Hajj, when the Hajj was made an obligation, and there is a difference of opinion amongst the scholars, some say after Hudaybiyah, some say after Fatih Makkah. Irregardless, the implementation of it wasn't until after Fatih Makkah. But when the verse came in Surah Al Imran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that those who have the means must make this journey. So as Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is telling the companions of this obligation, one of the companions he asked, he said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are we obligated to make it every year? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam remains silent and turns his head. And the companion, he asked him again, he said, Ya Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, are we obligated to make it every year? And again, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam remains silent and turns his head. And then he asks him the third time. And now Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam responds, he says, if I had said yes, then you would have been obligated to make it every year. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, turned his head because he didn't like the question. Don't ask questions that get you into trouble. This is, one of the major lessons we get from Surah Baqarah. Why Surah Baqarah is called Surah Baqarah. The Bani Israel was ordered to sacrifice a cow, and now they start asking questions. The command was simply sacrifice a cow. They could have picked any cow. But then they become restricted to only one cow. And then they don't want to sacrifice it. So one of the same things here. This person is asking this question that if Rasulullah says yes, then every believer would be obligated to make this journey every year. This is his mercy, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He didn't say yes, he said no. But this is also his authority. This should teach us the authority that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He has given him the authority to make the law. Because again, he said, if I had said yes. But he said no out of his mercy. So one of the things that right off the bat we should understand here, because this is simply talking about right now, we're just at the beginning of the command of the Hajj being an obligation. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is teaching us through this the authority He has given His Habib sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that's the key point, is given. Because like when we talk about the knowledge of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is the knowledge Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given His beloved sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So those who deny that, oh no, he didn't have the knowledge of the unseen. We're not talking about him having it. None of us have anything. It is what we are given. There is no authority except for Allah in reality. There is no knowledge in reality except for Allah. There is no life except for Allah. There is no power except for Allah. But when He gives something, then to deny that is also kufr. Simple example. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given fire the authority to burn. So if I light up a fire, or I turn the stove on, and say, no, only Allah has power and authority, and I put my hand in it, then I shouldn't complain when I start, getting blisters and it hurts. Because again, this is the authority Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given the fire. And it's interesting, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about Rasulullah, in Arabic there are two words. There's ata, which is, I give something, but I also retain certain rights over that. Simple example of this is governments. Like we think, oh, this is mine. I own this property. I may own it, but I don't have total control over it. Because the government retains authority over it. They can tell me, okay, you can't do this, you can do this. Or they can say, oh, you didn't pay your taxes, so we're taking it. And it doesn't even matter. I didn't pay my I paid my taxes, but we need it for this purpose. So now we'll take it. We'll give you a little something to appease you for the moment. But again, they attain authority over it. There's another thing called a'ata. When we read inna a'atayna, this is a'ata. This is where something is given, and the one who's giving it removes himself from any authority. Now you can do with it whatever you want. And this is what we see in Inna A'tainaka al-Kawthar, where the Creator says to His beloved that I give to you abundance. Of what? Of everything. Of authority, of knowledge. So that you now have authority over that, to do with whatever you wish. But He also has given him the authority, but has created him as the mercy. So again, here when we talk about the Hajj, He had the authority to say, no, you have to make it every year. But out of His mercy, He says, no, just once in a lifetime. This is, again, this relationship between the lover, subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the beloved, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So again, the authority that He's given him. So this should be right off the bat, when we think about the Hajj, this should be the first thing that we think of. Is, again, this Rasulullah sallallahu is the greatest sign of Allah. And so again, when we look at, and as I mentioned, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the Hajj in the Quran, or the ritual aspects of the Hajj or the Umrah, He talks about His signs. Inna as-safa wal marwata min sha'air Allah. Safa and Marwa are the signs of Allah. I mean, they're barely hills. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Everest, He created K2, He created everything. He doesn't mention any of these huge mountains or mountain ranges. He talks about two hills that according to English don't even qualify as mountains. Of course, in Arabic, they are Jabal, they are the mountains. And in reality, the reality is greater than any other mountain. Why? Because when we look at the Hajj, the whole Hajj is about the nisbah, the connection between Allah and the ones that He loves. So in this verse itself, إِنَّ السَّفَ وَالْمَرْوَةَ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about two rocks, literally. And what makes them significant? What makes them, or what gives them this distinction that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions them in the Quran as His signs? Simply the running between the two of them, of the wife of Ibrahim alayhi salam, Bibi Hajj, salamullah alayha. You know, people run all the time. You know, people run a whole marathon. You know, if you've been there, it's not that far. You know, a couple of 100 yards between the two. You know, it's not like you're not even running, you know, a 5K. Allah doesn't mention the running of anybody else, but He mentions her running because of her connection with Him, and in reality, her connection with the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. She's running, yes. She's running for her child. I mean, why was she running? Because no food, no water. She's running between these two outcroppings, climbing each one, looking, seeing if there's anybody who can give them something to eat or drink. Many women run for their children. Many women sacrifice many things for their children. Again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't mention any of them. But He mentions her as His sign. Because she's running for her son, who's not just any son. That son is who? Ismail alayhi salam, who is carrying within him the nur of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to be passed down through the generations. This is what distinguished her from any other woman. What distinguished her running from the running of anyone else. And it's interesting, you know, she's doing this before Ibrahim alayhi salam is commanded to call for the Hajj, and is commanded to teach the people the rights of the Hajj. So even Ibrahim alayhi salam, at that point, when he's commanded to do this, it now is commanded to also fulfill the sunnah of his wife. Because Ibrahim alayhi salam also has to run between Safa and Marwa, which is the sunnah of who? Of his wife, Bibi Hajj. It's interesting, you know, if you look at the placement of the verse in the Quran, this verse comes shortly after the verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Baqarah, وَلَا تَقُولُوا لِمَنْ يُقْتَلُ فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتٌ بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. That do not say that those who have been slain, those who have been killed in the way of Allah, that they are dead. Do not say that those who have been killed in the way of Allah, that they are dead, but they are alive. بَلْ أَحْيَاءٌ وَلَكِنْ لَا تَشْعُرُونَ. But you don't perceive it. So what's the connection with this verse? And إِنَّ السَّفَ وَالْمَرْوَةَ مِنْ شَعَائِرِ اللَّهِ. Imam Fakhruddin Razi, rahmatullah alayhi, he says that the connection between the verse, because you see this verse and then you see a couple other verses again talking about, you know, the testing and the sacrifice, which are all related to Karbala, if you look at them directly. And then this verse comes within the same section of the Quran. So Fakhruddin Razi rahmatullahi alayhi, he says what? He says that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is talking about that do not say about those who are slain in the way of Allah that they are dead, because they are alive. Even the path that they take are still alive. The places that they run are still alive. So again, the Hajj is not simply going and, doing things. It is understanding what you're doing, why you're doing it, understanding the connection between those who did it initially and Allah, because that connection reminds you of Allah. This is why they are the signs of Allah. In Surah Al Imran, again, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's talking about the Hajj, He's talking about the sanctuary, the sanctity of that place. And He says, that فيه من آياته, in this are signs, multiple, plural, signs. فيه من آياته بينات, فيه من آياته بينات مقام إبراهيم. In this are signs, clear signs, not just any signs. In this are clear signs, and then he only mentions one thing, Maqam Ibrahim. So you have plural signs, and then you have Maqam Ibrahim, which is singular. Maqam Ibrahim is singular. And yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about clear signs, multiple, which tells us that Maqam Ibrahim isn't just one sign. It's multiple signs. What is Maqam Ibrahim first? If we think about it simply as a physical place, then we know, okay, this is the stone in which Ibrahim al-Islam stood as he was building the Kaaba. Ismail al-Islam would hand him the stones, he would place the stones. When the stones got to such an extent that they were too high, then Ismail al-Islam brings this stone. And it's not a small stone. He brings this stone and he places it there, and then Ibrahim al-Islam stands on that stone as he's placing the other stones. And as is the miracle of the prophets, when they stand on soft dirt, if they don't want, there are no signs, no footprints. And yet if they stand on a rock, if they want, their imprint is left there. And when you go, and of course now they've changed it a little bit, they put a silver lining around it, but if you were ever able to go and look in there, in the box that they have it enclosed in, the glass, you can still see the footprint of Ibrahim a.s. So he stands on this stone, and he's building the Kaaba. The stone knows where to go. It's not like he's got to pick it up and move it. He stands on the stone, and the stone knows where he wants to be, what level he wants to be at, where the next stone goes. Why? Because of the connection to Ibrahim. Even the stones that are connected to the ones Allah loves attain this knowledge. But maqam, when we talk about maqam in general, maqam is status. It is the position of somebody. It is their status. And this is maqam Ibrahim. Two points very quickly, and we'll probably restart from here next week, inshallah. One is that, again, maqam is status. When Abu Bakr Shibli, rahmatullah's student, came back from Hajj, He asked him many questions. When you were here, did you do this? Were you here, did you do this? The question he asked about Maqam Ibrahim, he said, when you were at Maqam Ibrahim, did you have a realization of that status? And he said, no. He said, then you weren't at Maqam. You didn't make 2 rakat at Maqam Ibrahim. What is the status of Ibrahim alayhi salam? We see this when he's being thrown into the fire. When Namrud builds the fire, creates this catapult because this fire is so large no one can get close. And Ibrahim alayhi salam is in the catapult. All the angels are in an uproar. What is going on? Ya Allah, this is your Khalil, this is your friend. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows Jibreel, he gives him permission. He says, you can go. Ask him, what does he want? So he comes to Ibrahim alayhi salam. And he says, I've come to help you. Get you out of this situation. Ibrahim alayhi salam says what? He says, why should I ask you for help when you prostrated to my father, Adam? But he simply asks him one question. He says, is Allah seeing me? Allah is seeing everything. There's nothing hidden from Allah. The question isn't, is Allah seeing him? He's asking, is Allah looking upon me with His pleasure? Is Allah pleased with me? This is the question. And he says, yes. He says, then go. If Allah is pleased with me being thrown into the fire, I am pleased with being thrown into the fire. This is Maqam Ibrahim. I am pleased with the pleasure of Allah. This is Maqam Ibrahim. There is no place in the Quran, there is no place in the Hadith where there is mention of any dua that Ibrahim alayhi salam made at that time. That, oh Allah, save me or do this. He didn't make any dua. He was simply pleased with the pleasure of Allah. This is Maqam Ibrahim. We are commanded. وَاتَّخَذُوا مِن مَقَامِ إِبْرَاهِيمَ مُصَلَّى. Why are we commanded to make this salat at Maqam Ibrahim? This is in response to the question of Umar radiallahu anhu. He comes to Rasulullah, so he says, Ya Rasulullah, I want to make sajda to Allah where Ibrahim alayhi salam stood. I want to make sajda to Allah at the feet of Ibrahim. The other companions, they came and said, when Umar radiallahu anhu says this, Ya Umar, we just left, worshipping stones. What are you talking about? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the verse in defense of the question of, or the request of Umar. That you honor the places where the friends of Allah stood. By worshipping Allah there. The topic of the Hajj is very extensive. We'll talk about that the next couple of weeks, inshallah. And everybody knows the reality. We won't even scratch the surface. But the point I'm trying to make is, the rituals are the rituals, but we need to understand the spirituality behind the rituals. Otherwise, the movements don't matter. And now the condition is such because everybody's so distracted. It used to be you would walk into the haram and you would see the Kaaba. And you could see the nur and you'd be focused on it. But now with all the distractions that they've created, trying to make the significance of the Kaaba insignificant, which of course is an impossibility. but because we are trained now to be distracted. No one can focus on anything. So now you walk in and everybody is looking at this tower and that tower and this and that. The focus is all lost. Because we don't even realize what we're focusing on. So when we go, we need to know what are we looking at. And the reality of the Kaaba, and we'll talk about this next week inshallah, is that it is the pulpit of Rasulullah. This is where he began his mission. And this is why Ibrahim al-Islam made the dua and Ismail al-Islam made the dua that they did after they completed the raising of the foundations of the Kaaba. So again, we'll go over that next week inshallah. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to understand and give us His love and the love of His beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family, his companions, and all of those whom they love. And may He give protection and strength and victory to our brothers and sisters in Palestine and wherever the Muslims are being oppressed against those that are the oppressors. Those who have not made sunnah, go and make sunnah inshallah.